In this video, I am going to explain inductive versus deductive language learning in children. So to understand inductive and deductive language learning, I think we have to understand the meanings of the words inductive and deductive. So they come from the verbs induce and deduce, and we can actually separate each of these words into smaller parts. So because we have the same part here and here, deuce, this actually means to lead, and in this one, this prefix in, it means actually in, and the prefix d means something like away or apart. I'm going to give you more concrete examples, but the meaning of induce is to derive a general principle from specific observations. So first you make observations, you make specific observations, you make concrete observations about some things, and then from those observations you try to find a general principle, and this is to induce. And when you say deduce, often it means to form an opinion about something based on the information or evidence that is available. So this means to form an opinion about something based on what you already know. But here, more importantly, deduce means to infer from a general principle. So you already know a general principle, and based on that general principle, you make inferences about more specific things. So I'll give you examples later, but here the direction is the opposite. So when we say induce, first we have specific observations, and based on those observations we derive a general principle. But in the case of deduce, we from the beginning we know the general principle, and based on the general principle we make inferences about more specific things. I think we need to look at examples to understand these, but so the words inductive and deductive come from these two verbs, induce and deduce, and we can also get nouns like induction and deduction from these two verbs. So what is induction, what is deduction, what is induce, and what is deduce? So in the case of induction or induce, we know examples, we know concrete examples, and then based on these examples we try to find a rule or general principle that explains these concrete examples. So so in this sense, we lead our mind from these examples inward to the rule. So duce is to lead. So in a sense, we lead our own mind from these examples inward to the rule. And in the case of deduction or deduce, we know the rule, we know the principle, and then we lead our mind away from this rule to more concrete examples around it. Okay, so this is the images of induction and deduction. And I'm going to give you some more, even more concrete examples. So when we induce or when we use induction or inductive thinking, first we make observations about specific examples. For example, let's say I'm a doctor and I examine my own body and I find out that I have a heart in my body, in my chest. And then I examine you, and then I find out that you also have a heart. And I examine someone else, and they also have a heart. And we are all humans. So from these specific observations, I use my inductive thinking and come to a general principle that any human has a heart. So I use these specific examples, specific observations to reach a general principle that a human has a heart. So in this case, we go from concrete examples to an abstract rule or principle. In the case of deduction or deduce, we go in the opposite direction. So first, we know the general principle that any human has a heart. Okay? And so based on this general principle, we can make inferences about me, you, and other people. I am a human, and because I am a human, and because this general principle is true, I, a human, have a heart. If we make, if we deduce, if we use our deductive thinking like this, we don't have to examine, or in this case myself, because this is true based on this general principle. This is deductive thinking. So we know from the beginning, we know the general principle says any human has a heart, and I am a human, so I have a heart too. And you are a human, and so you have a heart too. Even so, we can say this even without examining you. So we make inferences about specific examples based on the general principle. So in this case, we go from the abstract principle to concrete examples. So we go in the opposite directions. And from now on, let's think about the language learning. So first, let's think about inductive learning of, well, in this case, plural S grammar. So when we say inductive learning, it means that first we learn specific examples of the rule. So here we are talking about the grammatical rule of plural S. And if we inductively learn plural S, first we learn specific examples. So 1 book, 1 dog, 1 car, 2 books, 3 dogs, 4 cars. So these are examples that we can get by applying the rule of plural S. And but at first we don't know the rule. We don't know this. We don't know this rule. first we get exposed to these examples: one book, two books, one dog, three dogs. And then from these examples, we consider what kind of rule is behind these. So what kind of rule explains these examples? So the point is, first we learn these examples, and only later we come to this rule. Okay, so this is inductive learning of plural S, and this is something that naturally happens when children learn their mother tongue. So because nobody really teaches them this kind of grammatical rule. So, for example, in America, children learn English as their mother tongue, and they have to find out this rule by somehow examining these concrete examples. Okay, so what about the deductive learning of plural S? So in this case, we go in this direction. So what we do first is to learn the rule. So we learn the rule first, and we apply this to specific cases and get these specific examples. So the direction is the opposite. First, we learn the rule, and then we apply it to specific cases, and then through that application of the rule, we come to these examples, specific examples or concrete examples. So we learn the rule first. And these inductive learning and deductive learning are actually related to children's cognitive development. The word cognitive is it's a little difficult to understand, I think, but here it means something like intelligence, where actually cognition is more I think broader term than intelligence. I think cognition is the meaning of cognition is broader than the meaning of intelligence. But here, to make matters simpler, please understand this something like yes, intelligence. Sorry. And there used to be a famous researcher called Piaget. He made very well-known observations about children's cognitive development, and according to his observations, there are four major stages in children's cognitive development. And the first one is called the sensory motor stage, and the second one is called pre-operational stage, and the third one is called the concrete operational stage, and the fourth one is called formal operational stage. And here these two stages are important because we are learning about children's language learning at elementary school, and elementary school children are mostly in this stage. And also we want to compare elementary school English and junior high school English. So we want to know we should know the distinction between this stage and this stage. And junior high school students, most of them are in this stage, and also senior high school students and adults are in this stage too. So to compare elementary school English and junior high school English, we should know the distinction between this stage, concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. So so because the concrete operational stage begins around 7 years of age, and it continues up to around 11 or 12. Third and fourth graders are definitely in this stage, and the fifth and sixth graders are somewhere around the transition between the concrete operational stage and the formal operational stage. Maybe some of them are still in the concrete operational stage, but some others may be already in the formal operational stage. But we cannot say that all of them, or all fifth graders or all sixth graders are already in the formal operational stage. We can't say that. Some of them are still in the concrete operational stage, and perhaps many of them are still in the concrete operational stage. So we should assume so, especially when we teach them. But when it comes to junior high school, many students are already in the formal operational stage. So to think about language teaching, we have to understand the distinction between elementary school children and junior high school students in terms of cognitive development. So how different are these two stages? So let's start with the concrete operational stage. Well, in this stage, children begin to think logically. So it means that children in the previous stage, the pre-operational stage, the children in this stage, they cannot really think logically. But in this stage, in the concrete operational stage, logical thinking is possible in children. So children can think logically if they are thinking about concrete objects and events. So, but they can't really think logically if they try to think about abstract concepts, because in this stage, children's abstract thinking is not yet developed. Okay. And in this stage, children can think inductively. They can think inductively and make a generalization based on specific observations. So if you give children in this stage some concrete examples, they can make a generalization by themselves. They can do it. They can think inductively. But they still struggle. So they have a problem with deductive thinking, and they are actually poor at using a general principle to predict specific examples. So they can think inductively, but they are not really good at thinking deductively. So if you give them a general principle first and have them try to predict specific examples based on the general principle, they are not really good at that. But if you give them specific examples, concrete examples first, and let them think inductively and let them generalize by themselves, they can do it. In contrast, in the formal operational stage, people in this stage were yes, people including children and also adolescents and maybe adults, people in this stage can think about abstract concepts. And also, they are capable of deductive thinking, so they can think deductively. So, so if you give children in this stage or people in this stage, if you give them a rule or general principle first, they can use that rule or the general principle to predict specific cases, specific examples. So they can make inferences based on a general principle. So they can think deductively in this stage. So, so elementary school children, they can think inductively, but they are not really good at deductive thinking. But junior high school students can think both inductively and deductively. And we have to keep this in mind when we think about language learning and language teaching. And also, thinking about abstract things, abstract concepts, that's actually very difficult for young children. They can think about concrete objects and concrete things, concrete events, but they are not really good at thinking about something too abstract, abstract concepts. So if we think about language teaching and language learning, the developmental differences between elementary school children and junior high school students are very important. So elementary school children and junior high school students are in different developmental stages of cognition or intelligence. Because of that, deductive teaching of English or deductive learning of English is possible at junior high school, but it may be difficult for elementary school children because elementary school children are not cognitively mature enough. At elementary school, we should employ inductive teaching of English instead of deductive teaching of English. Because at elementary school, elementary school children, they are already able to think inductively. And this is also important. Inductive teaching of English can also be used at junior high school. And I think this is important. And in fact, even adults learn some aspects of a second language inductively if they go abroad. So if you go to a foreign country where English is spoken, I think you will learn inductively. You will learn English inductively. So at elementary school, we should promote children's inductive learning, and our teaching should be inductive. So we should give examples, many concrete examples, and we should expose children to those examples, and some of the children will come to realize a rule or a general principle behind those examples, and maybe some other children don't do so. But even if they don't, they will in the future they will be taught the same rule when they go to junior high school. So the important thing at elementary school is to give children these examples, concrete examples, and let them try to generalize. I mean, they will do this spontaneously, even if we don't tell them to do so. They will do this spontaneously. They will realize that there is a rule behind this. So we don't have to ask them. We don't have to explicitly ask them to come to realize the rule behind these examples. Children naturally try to do it. And at junior high school, actually, I think we should start from inductive teaching and then move on to deductive teaching. So actually, the starting point is the same as elementary school. We should give the students examples first. So concrete examples first, and then only then we teach the rule behind those examples. And if we teach after teaching this rule, we go back to the examples. So even at junior high school, we should not start from the rule. First, we should give the students examples, concrete examples, and we should let them try to think what is the rule behind these examples, and then we should give them we should teach them the specific rule or the principle, or in this case the rule of plural s, and then we give them some more examples, some more concrete examples. Alright, this is the end of the video.